Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today, we are kicking off things with a passion project of mine. I am having candid conversations with various guests as part of the Transforming Inner Pain mini-series, where you'll hear inspiring stories of hope, healing, and triumphing over adversity. I am your host, Kayla Brissi, and it is an honor to have Miss Deborah Kos with us here today to share her story about losing a loved one in the midst of COVID-19. Welcome so much to the show, Miss Deborah.
Thank you, Kayla, for letting me share my story with your audience.
You're welcome. So let me tell you a little bit about Deborah before we dive into her story. So Deb is the owner of Deb's Decorative Life and co-author of the best-selling books Out of My Comfort Zone and The Beauty in My Best, Volume 2. She is a professional lifestyle blogger who helps busy moms by offering household and life hacks to lessen their stress, allowing them to spend more quality time with their families. So I am really excited to kick off the series and really dive into your story and how you've transformed your inner pain, work through overcoming the adversity, and ultimately are on your healing journey with losing a loved one. And obviously, for those that that are tuning in that don't know, I lost my father. Oh my gosh, almost 4 years ago now at the time of this recording. And, it still feels like yesterday. And grief is a fickle thing. The healing journey is quite a journey. And it's very unique for every single person. And with the last year with COVID, oh my goodness, it's been even more challenging for those that have lost loved ones because of the restrictions that we have. We're not able to grieve our normal way. We're not able to have the funerals the way that we want to have them or honor our loved ones, the way that we typically would. And that has really changed the dynamic from my perspective and things that I've seen, overall with really just learning how to, embrace that journey and work through those feelings of grief and loss and ultimately coming out at the other end, of reclaiming our life and finding a way to really honor our loved ones and, keep their memory alive. So Deborah, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story and your journey? Talk to us about your loved one that you have lost and how things have really kind of changed for you or building up to the point of when you had lost your loved one and really the whole process.
Well, a lot of it started a little bit before we actually found out what COVID was or when it hit. My father-in-law had an infection and went into the hospital to get it treated. And during that time, they kept watching it, and it was like 6 weeks he was in the hospital. They kept watching that infection, and it was taking real slow. It was going real slow. The next thing we kind of know was that we thought he was getting better, and then the infection got worse. So at this point, they had to put him into a rehab place. And right during that time, somehow, I remember finding out this word COVID and all this stuff going on. At this point, he was at the rehab center. We knew he had to be there for a minimum of 6 weeks because they had to give him a 6-week IV to clear that infection. And at this point, I think it was we started seeing him in the beginning, like the first couple of days. And then all of a sudden, boom, everything's on lockdown.
And it's difficult because, if we think about it, where we are right now at the time of this recording, we're in the middle of March and we are coming up on our 1 year of essentially being in lockdown. And it's hard to think, time has flown by for the past year, but it's really hard to believe that we've been really dealing with this for an entire year now. And it still feels like we're not really getting through it, in my opinion. Like I still feel like it was, back in last March where things were on lockdown and we had so many restrictions. So, oh gosh, like it's been an interesting journey COVID wise for everybody, I think.
And what even made it was harder was when we'd locked down and we couldn't see him. We tried to call him every day, but
Mhm.
he can't hear good. So he doesn't hear
Oh,
the phone ring. Or he doesn't know how to answer it, or he doesn't know how to turn it up, or it was off. We don't It was a chore trying to get a nurse on the phone to go get him to answer the phone or to call us or whatever. That was the hardest part. And at this time, they weren't doing the Zoom thing because they weren't even thinking about that yet because it was so new.
mhm. So it sounds like you had a really difficult time trying to, one, get a hold of your loved one and be able to communicate, but you also experienced a lot of difficulties with the medical staff and with the start of COVID-19, not that they weren't taking things seriously, but we didn't know what we didn't know at the time back then. And they didn't know all the things that they could have been doing to help us with our loved ones that were, basically in isolation away from us that we so dearly wanted to get in touch with and communicate with and talk to and just check in. So how did that experience impact your journey of leading up to when your father-in-law passed, um, with you not being able to communicate with him or not being able to see him? How did that impact you?
Well, it hurt. It really hurt my husband tremendously because that was his father.
Mhm.
And every day, and his family is so used to being close, very close. They were always running, going to each other's birthday parties, everything. They were always busy, always close. This really took a burden on him. And I could see him sitting there at night, just kind of stewing and upset. And
Mhm.
he can't get a hold of his father. When his father calls, his father's telling him, "Get me out of here. I don't want to
Right.
be here," which I understand. So not only did not seeing him, and then him saying, "I don't want to be here. I want to get out. Come pick me
Mhm.
up." My husband was like being torn.
Yeah, it's a lot of stress. It's an emotional roller coaster. I mean, no doubt, with everything that's going on, despite having COVID into the mix. And, I sympathize with your husband. I empathize because I get it. Like, I understand. There's nothing worse than seeing a loved one that is having some health issues and you love them dearly, but you know that you can't do what you want to be able to do. You want to be able to take away that pain. You want to be able to help them. You want them to get better. You want to be able to do all the things that they're asking of you to do, even though you really can't, and it's that inner turmoil. You experience that pain of knowing that you wish that there was more that you could do, but you're kind of you're at a standstill. You're at a crossroads. You can't do those things. And so it ends up putting a lot of pressure and stress and emotional roller coaster on you, the emotional burden of just dealing with the situation, which is, it's unfortunate, but, more often than not, a lot of people experience that as well. So when your father-in-law was ill and he was in the hospital or and getting support, so about how long was he there by himself before he ended up that he had passed?
He was actually there 6 weeks.
Okay.
And we had the release date on the calendar. And I think it was something like 3, 4 days. I can't remember what it was that he would get out of the hospital.
Mhm.
Boom, we got the call late in the night. He's got COVID.
Oh.
Right at the end of the journey almost.
Mhm.
So that was another drama trying to get him on the phone and find out what's going on. We couldn't even talk to him at this point.
Yeah.
Um, and I think at that one, there was one point he was just constantly on the ventilator or oxygen, and we were talking to the nurses, and all of a sudden he's doing really, really well. And there's like, yeah, he's doing good. He's picking up. It was like to the end of the 14 days almost. He was doing really good, really good. The next day, he was gone.
Wow, I didn't realize it hit that quick.
It hit that quick. And it was a shock because we thought he was getting ready to come home.
Sure.
And we thought, he had beat the COVID, because the next thing we knew from the nurse was, yeah, he's doing good.
Mm. It had to have been unbelievably difficult to think that he was getting better, that there was hope that he was coming home, and then all of a sudden you get the call that nobody ever wants to receive, trust me, and know that he's no longer with you. Oh goodness, I'm really sorry about that. I know you and I talk a lot and we're very close, and I don't know that I even knew that from the part of your story. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I know that had been very difficult for you. So once that transpired and you lost your loved one and you were embarking on finding his services and honoring his life, I know things there had even been different in terms of being able to make those funeral arrangements and things of that nature. And how did that really impact you and your family as a whole, of really being able to process that grief and that loss?
Well, the main problem was at the time was the family's so big, we could only have like 10 at the gravesite. We
Mhm.
couldn't we couldn't even do the inside of the funeral home at this point or anything. The problem was we couldn't even say nothing to anybody that he had died, because if they would have shown up, they would have gotten kicked out.
Hmm.
So that was even harder. We couldn't really tell anybody.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine that, because
Yeah, wait till after the graveside with just the immediate family, and I mean just the immediate 10, until and then we could tell everybody. And then they were upset. Why didn't you tell us?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, we can't. We couldn't, because of COVID, because we can't, the funeral home doesn't want the risk of everybody coming to the
Yeah, they had to
graveside.
take those precautions. And when you have a large family, we've got a large family, so I get it. When you have a large family, you have to take those, precautions right now. And it's an unfortunate situation, but you have to take those precautions. And yeah, I can understand that they were really upset by it, because, they weren't there. They wanted to be able to honor their loved ones, their friends, their colleagues' life, whatever the case may be. And they weren't able to really fully do that. And I'm sure, no doubt, that that really impacted, really, not only yourself, but everyone else, in terms of really being able to process that grief and say their goodbyes. You know, there's something in, for me personally, like whenever I have a loved one that I've lost, or a colleague, or whatever the case may be, but when I attend a funeral, it's a way for me to experience a little bit of closure, to say goodbye, to say anything that I need to be said. And it helps with that grieving journey, the grieving process, and just really solidifying that they're no longer here, that they have been called home to be with our Lord. And so I know for me and myself, when I can't go to a funeral and do these things, like it's really difficult to be able to kind of process what's actually happened. And it almost kind of delays the grieving and the loss and the healing journey, because it's almost like you don't have that validation. Like as morbid as that may seem, but when you are at a funeral, you have the validation that they're no longer here with us. And it helps make it essentially more real. It helps your mind process things. Even for when I lost my dad, for the funeral and everything, I mean, I was there and I was present, but it really wasn't until 2-3 weeks later when it really actually hit me that he was gone. And I think part of that was because I was so wrapped up in all the details and making sure everyone knew, and welcoming people that were coming to the wake, and doing all the things I needed to do, that even though I was physically there, I wasn't really able to have the closure that I needed to
Right.
be able to move forward. And so I know for myself, like that was really difficult for me. And I'm sure, it's probably very similar for you and others as well. So with you losing your loved one, and you also being an entrepreneur and being a wife and a mother, wearing all the hats that we all wear, how has it impacted you in your growth and your progress with your business, and over the past year, really just everything that's been going on?
Well, the main thing is, it's bad enough you're trying to grieve somebody's death, but when you add COVID to it, and you're trying to wrap your head around COVID, and I don't know for how many weeks I was mad at COVID. I hate you, COVID. Why did you take my father-in-law? And then I kept writing in my journal. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. Like, it was like, why did you take my father-in-law? You got him better, and then all of a sudden, poof. Why? Why? You keep asking questions in your head, and it's like, first you got to deal with this COVID thing to even start to figure out to grieve with the loss of the person.
Mm-hmm.
It was confusing. I just kind of sat in the chair and just kind of sat there, and I kept thinking, why, what happened? How could it have been prevented? Da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. It was just weird.
Yeah, it's weird. And no doubt, like even for myself, you know, I've lost a few family members since my dad has passed, and every one of them, their loss has impacted me, in some way, shape, or form, some more significant than, than others. And, it's a journey, and it does impact you. And I know for me, there were days that I was feeling less inspired. I was struggling to be able to get all the to-do lists done. My creativity was stifled. I just had days where I was crabby. I was angry. I was upset, and it's a huge emotional roller coaster. So I know for myself, I saw the impacts of my grief and my loss within my business, and even the dynamics with my family. I found that I wanted to be more alone. I wanted to be to myself. I wanted to process things. I was a little bit more short than I probably should have been with some of them. And, that has been, as much as I hate to say it, but it's also been very eye-opening as I look back, and it's been, hindsight's always 2020. And I can see how I behaved and the things that I did, but I can also see where I was within my healing journey and going through each of the stages of that healing journey. And it's when you're going through grief and you're going through and you're having these experiences, so many people think that grief is linear and you're going to go through these stages of grief and everything is going to be perfect. You're going to come out at the other end and it's going to be all rainbows and unicorns. But the reality is every single person's grief journey is unique. No two people are the same. Some can be over with the loss of a loved one within months. Sometimes it takes others years, and you zigzag through these different stages of the grief cycle. And you think like, yeah, I'm moving forward. I'm at the acceptance stage, and now you're back and you're going through and you're back in the depressed stage. Like, oh, why did this happen? Why am I here? And you sit there like a ping pong ball, you're zinging back and forth between these. And it's almost like you can get whiplash sometimes as you're going through these different stages. But that's all part of, the journey. It's all part of really, embracing the journey that you're on, for those that are going through grief, embracing that journey and honoring it, because it is very unique to you. It is part of your healing journey. And the more that you embrace it and the more that you are in tune with where you are on your journey, the easier that journey is going to become and the quicker you're going to come out on the other side of it. It's when you bottle those things up and you don't want to process that grief is when it ends up being where you're almost like a shaken up soda bottle and all of a sudden you just burst and everything explodes. And then things are 10 times worse than what it could be because you didn't process anything. You didn't embrace that journey. You didn't accept what was really going on and process those emotions and feelings. So for me, there were some things that I did to really help with that healing journey, such as, meditation and journaling and, things like that. I'm curious, what things have you done for yourself that have really helped with your healing journey to help you get through a lot of, the setbacks and confusion with COVID and just really processing, the loss of your in-law?
A lot of it was journaling to COVID,
Mm-hmm.
journaling the grief. I hid a lot of it from my husband because I knew he was having a hard time. I didn't want
Mm-hmm.
him to know what I was going through. So my journal was my friend, my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, part of it was there was one point where I knew I had to get off that chair already. It was like, I can't be living this way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really there for my son, or I'm just not there. And I did what other people normally do. You throw yourself in your work and you just try to forget.
You
And
do.
that's not the healthiest thing, but that's what you do.
Yeah. Hey, I admit it. I totally did it too. And it's a coping mechanism. And I think, especially for those that are business owners or even those that are in a professional career, that tends to be one of the coping mechanisms that I see in that experience with a lot of my clients is that they dive headfirst into their work. They focus on it because it's a way to kind of keep moving. It's not that they're forgetting about the person that they lost, but they need to continue to keep moving forward, and they're trying to find a way to get back into the normal, even though their normal is a new normal.
And there were still times in my business where, like, one time I got a DM and we were talking about my father-in-law, and I just had to get off that DM and I just had to go in the other room and
Mhm.
let the tears just come out.
Mhm. Yeah, and
And
that
then,
crying is good. It's therapeutic.
there was a couple, two times on video where I almost really, really broke down.
Mhm.
It just hits you when you least expect it.
Oh, it does. Even for myself, even now with it going on almost 4 years, there's a song will come on the radio that will remind me of my dad, and I will start crying. Sometimes it'll bring a smile to my face and I'll laugh, but other times, I'm you know, crying like a baby sitting in the car while I'm driving. And it hits you at the least opportune times. It seems it never fails. It's when you least expect it and when you don't want it to hit is when they often do. So I can empathize with you there. It's super fun.
Mhm.
It is. Okay, so we are coming up here where we should probably get ready to wrap things up a little bit. So my last question that I have for you is, with you really embarking on this journey and healing and embracing everything that you've overcome, to really overcome this adversity of losing a loved one and processing grief and all of that into the mix, what would you wish to say to others that are also going through an experience similar to this? What advice can you give them?
Well, allow yourself the time to grieve, work through it, but you need to figure out when the cutoff time is, because your family needs you. Your
Mhm.
friends need you. The person that died doesn't want you to be grieving that long. They want you to go on with your life. Try to remember, take the time, deal with it, but know when there's reasonable time to get back to your life, to be there for your family.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful message. All right, everybody. Well, it is time to wrap up this show. Thank you so much, Deb, for being a special guest on the Kayla Show and as part of the Transforming Inner Pain mini series. And thank you so much for sharing your story about how you've overcome adversity and processed your healing through grief. And just so you guys know, this story of Deb's will be included in the Embracing the Journey anthology, where over 10 brave women share their stories of hope, healing, and triumph over adversity that will release on July 15th. And surprisingly, as a fun bonus, the Embracing the Journey ebook will also be a bonus to my next best-selling book, Transforming Inner Pain, which releases on July 22nd, for anyone who purchases a physical copy of the book, which is also available for pre-order. Both books will be available for purchase on Amazon and other online retailers. As a reminder, anything that we've mentioned for links will be discussed and put in the show notes below. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks, Deb, for being here and sharing your story. And for all of you, make it an awesome day.
Thank you, Kayla.
You bet. Thanks, guys.